Hello friends, Father Kelly here from a secret, over-decorated bunker deep in the heart of Oklahoma City. And nerd alert, I suppose I've been reading Tolkien, well, the Book of Lost Tales from Tolkien. It's basically all the stuff he thought of before he wrote the stuff that everybody knows about. Shout out to Luke Meinholz for giving me this set of books a long time ago, finally got around to it. I was reading some of this last night though, and it's one of those things that I never thought I would be reading. Like if I was a kid and be like, oh, look at this big, long, tedious history about an imaginary world that doesn't even correspond to reality in the usual historical way. Don't mind him in the background. Pay no attention to the dog, don't look at him. That's not what we're here for. Good luck with that. But I never would have thought I'd be reading these things. However, here I am, and I'm, well, 190 something pages in, and it's fantastic. I only stopped because I had to go to bed last night. But as I was reading, there's this section particularly. Well, hold on. I was reading it, and it was good, and it was lining up with the way the world works. And then this morning, as I went to prepare for today's homily, I got to the first reading and went, oh, this sounds familiar. So, and of course it makes sense. I mean, everyone likes Tolkien's work because it is so true to the human experience. Maybe you don't realize that, but that's why. Because he captures the essential things, but in a narrative. He doesn't give us a lecture on morality, but the morality that is implicit in the world is written so well into his stories. But it's not just there. And so as I read the first reading today, which is from the book of Jeremiah, the connection lined up very strongly to what I read last night, to what was, hi buddy, not right now, what I read in the section called The Theft of Melko and the Darkening of Valinor. I will try and spare all of the names of the Middle-earth folks, well, they're not even on Middle-earth, see technicalities already. I will try and spare the names of all these people and explain in generalist terms as possible. For those of you who are not name people, because I'm really not either, it just happened to have it written in front of me. But in general, so it's kind of like the Greek gods, where there's a certain, there's, in Tolkien's world, there's God, as we would refer to in the Christian sense, the all-powerful creator of everything, but then below him, in this book, there are other gods. And so one of them is a guy named Melko, or God named Melko, who is peers with many others, but then he's essentially the one who turns evil and does the bad stuff. And in this particular passage, he's speaking to a different set of peoples who are below the gods in a way. But what he does is the thing that all the evil people do. If you read the later Lord of the Rings books, Saruman does this kind of stuff all the time. But even if you look at like dictators that we know from history, the bad guys from history, they say this exact same kind of stuff. So let me give without just reading too much of a book to you. Let me read this part. He's speaking to they're called the Noldoli or gnomes, who are a lesser people, but they sort of work. They are empowered to work by this other level of the gods. He says to them, this is Melko the bad guy, slaves are ye, or children, and you will bidden play with toys and seek not to stray or know too much. Basically, he's saying, lo, they use your skill, and to your beauty they hold fast as an adornment of their realms. This is not love, but selfish desire. He tells them to make test of it, and to ask for your inheritance, that is to go escape and be free of them. So he's saying, you are these people, and you're being held in subjugation by those who are above you. They're just using you for your skill. They don't really care about you and love you. And he says, go and be free, break off from that. And then the following sections, the following pages, describe how that thought enters into their head, and then it slowly leads them away from their joy and their happiness, because they think, oh, well, we're pretty great. We don't have to be under anybody else. And so they begin to break free, and it causes problems, and eventually their whole society effectively gets destroyed because of their pride and arrogance that this particular character sows among them. Then we have today the reading from the book of Jeremiah, where the Lord comes to him and sends him down to the potter's house, pottery wheel, clay, shaping it, like you make vases and coffee mugs and things. He says, Jeremiah is observing the prophet. He says, whenever the object of clay which he was making turned out badly in his hands, he tried again. Then he would make from the clay whatever he pleased. Then the Lord came to me. Can I not do to you, O house of Israel, as this potter has done? Indeed, like clay in the hand of the potter, so are you in my hand, house of Israel. So Jeremiah observes the potter making something, so as he does it, and then the Lord sort of comments on this and says, so are you like Israel, clay in my hands. And so you can see where these line up, that this character Melko could easily say to the Israelites, whom the Lord has said, you are clay in my hands, he's just oppressing you and shaping you the way you don't want to be shaped. You should break free and go do your own thing, he would say to the clay. Well, what happens if you take clay away from the potter's hands? It just sort of melts into a lump and falls over. Clay by itself, out of the pot, breaking free from the potter's hands, can't become anything beautiful. It's just a lump of dirt. And so, to break free, for the clay to say, I don't need you, potter, and to do its own thing, is for it to do nothing good at all. It will never become a pretty vase or a coffee cup or something fantastic. It's just a lump of dirt. Likewise, what happens with the people in the book, the Nodoli, certain level of folk, they did many beautiful things because they were being helped by the gods, and the gods provided for them, and they decorated the god, all the lands that were going on. But then when they begin to break free and find themselves, then they begin to be unhappy because they begin to become selfish and self-focused and miserable, and they break themselves off from those who were providing and helping them along. And it goes on to cause a great amount of ruin in the world. And so, Tolkien knows what he's talking about. We can see this very easily all the time. How many kids, for example, say, I can do it myself, and they push their parents away, and then suddenly, the thing they were building collapses and falls or fails because they rejected the wisdom that was trying to help them along. And so we shouldn't go, that's just in scripture, or that's just in books, real life isn't that way. Real life is totally that way. And we can see it on, honestly, all levels. I mean, I'm as guilty as anybody else of pushing away those who would help me on stuff. Honestly, I just had spiritual direction today, and it was one of those ones that I didn't like it because we were talking about things that are challenging, but it's good for me to be challenged and pushed, and to have my spiritual director say, well, maybe that's not the way you think it is, and kind of push me in the right direction to shape me into a certain way that I couldn't arrive at myself. And so we see that mentality cause problems everywhere if we pay attention. Whenever we try, sometimes there is genuine oppression that does need breaking free from. I'm not denying that. But very often, at least somewhat often, there are things that we in our pride think, I must break free from, I'm too good for this. But in fact, when we leave that, it destroys us. God's help us certainly that way. When we abandon God or push God away, then we fall and fail on our own. We become miserable on our own. We need that support and guidance and those gifts from the Lord to do well in this life. So, if you ever get a chance, though this is only volume 1 of, I think, 10, check this out. If not, read the Silmarillion. This is all the stuff that became the Silmarillion that then contributed to Lord of the Rings. Tolkien wrote a lot. But remember that he's so good because he understands human nature, and I think a lot of that is because of his deep Catholic faith. He understood what the church understands. He understands good and evil and how they play out in the world. So I want to share that connection with you. It was fascinating that this evil character was saying these things, to break free, to not do what you are, not to reject the way you're being helped along to beauty. And the very next day, we had this reading from Jeremiah, which expresses the exact same sentiment, that things go wrong if you reject your creator, your guide, your one who's giving you grace to help you along. So let us be humble to what does not need to be rejected, to submit ourselves in the appropriate way to those who are wiser than us, and be formed, therefore, into good and beautiful people and do good and beautiful things.